We'd read about some other farms giving fertigation a go and some of the fertiliser savings they were making. And so we just did a quick back of the envelope calculation on what we could save just in the fert spreader alone, and came up with some pretty tasty returns out of that. So launched into coming up with a more tailored design for this farm, and the numbers seem to work for us. So yeah, it is mostly an economic investment, but there's obviously some environmental gains in cutting back on the amount of nitrogen we're applying as well. I think it could be. The results that we've had so far are looking pretty promising. We've only had it operational for this calendar year, for the last 8 months, and it managed to cut back our urea usage or nitrogen usage by about 1/3 over that time. So we were spreading somewhere around about 220 units of N, and now down well below the 190 cap. So depending on where you're starting from, I think that all farmers would benefit from some reductions out of the system, and for most I think it would put them under that cap. We have for the bulk of the season, so we have 3 pivots here. We do have some K-line and some long lateral sprinklers, so we only have fertigation on the pivots. We still apply solid fertiliser in the larger K-line paddocks. We also don't apply it in the shoulders of the season as well. It's just not much point in running irrigation in May or September, October. So we do apply a first round of solid fertiliser, usually a quick start or a ammo type product, then fertigate on the pivots throughout the season, and then there might be 1 round of solid at the end. So our design for our fertigation system just fits in on top of how we irrigate. So we irrigate around about a 2.5 day rotation, and the fertigation is just applied at that same rate. So we have a pump and a tank at each pivot. We can change the rates as often as we like, and we can fertigate really as often as we like too. So it's not interrupting our irrigation at all. What it does mean is that on days like this, as you can see, it's pretty grey. If we need to put fertiliser on, we do need to irrigate to be able to do that. So on the shoulders of the season, depending on the weather patterns, it may or may not be plausible to really be doing that under cold conditions like this. We took a bit of a stab in the dark as to how much we want to apply. We've designed our system works on fertigating once a week. We put on about 4.5 units a week, so it works out at about between 13 and 15 units per round. Normally we'd be putting on about 22 units per round, so it was a bit of a guess as to how much less we think we could put on versus solid, and that also means that we're only having to top up our tanks every 2 weeks or so. So it's a bit of guesswork, and I guess we'll see over the next year or so just whether we've got it right or not. Not on the operational side. I guess our biggest risk is when you've got a liquid form of urea on the farm, that if you had a leak in a pipe or a tank or any storage facility, that it can disappear into the groundwater pretty quickly. So in the design of the system, we've got a lot of bunding and protection so that if any part of the system was to fail, that we don't end up dumping a whole lot of liquid nitrogen urea straight into the ground. So that's probably the biggest risk, is just protecting that storage of the liquid urea. So I guess the cost savings for us come in fert truck, or not having the fert truck on the farm, which is about half of the return that we're getting out of it. The other half is cutting back on the urea usage as well. So the liquid urea at this stage is roughly the same price as the solid urea. We're just using less of it. And so those two combined, based on the cost of the system, is providing about a 25 to 30% return on investment. I think the fertiliser spreader alone is about a 20% return on most years. So even if we were applying the same amount of nitrogen that we normally would, the return on just not having a truck on the farm that often is pretty good. I think farmers would definitely benefit from investigating whether it would fit into their system. We have quite an expensive system here because we have through 3 pivots, 6 groundwater pumps, and they're all interspersed around the farm. And so it'd be much cheaper if you had one water source coming onto the farm where you could inject the fertilizer and that would feed all your irrigation. So it just depends on what the setup is for your irrigation and the type of irrigation you have on your farm. But yeah, it's definitely worthwhile investigating.